All right, I like what you got there. Let me show you what I got. Check this out. Bring the bass line. Hey, yo, shut it down.
Hi, I am Thereadheadgemini, and thank you for joining us for Season 2, Episode 1, titled Power and Control. I do have a special guest. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell everybody where they can find you.
Good evening. My name is Peaky. You can find me on TikTok at its_Peaky. That's ITS_PEAKY. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. So today we're going to be exploring a subject that's often misunderstood in every relationship, workplace, and family, and that is power and control. For many men, power is tied to identity, respect, and survival. But when power becomes control, it harms the very people and the relationships that we claim to care about. In this conversation, we'll explore what power really means, how it shows up in men's lives, and how we can shift from control to healthy influence. So I'm just going to jump right into the questions. And the first question that I have for you today is, why do men equate control with love?
I think we do it unconsciously or subconsciously as an expression of our love. And we, as men, we have an understanding of how bad the world can be or how cold the world can be. So if we can put you in a bubble, or we'll just say it, if we can put it in a bubble and protect this bubble and keep this bubble safe, then that is our expression of love without knowing that we are actually confining you again to the bubble. So it's a misconception. Honestly, we do it without knowing.
Okay. I have found that many men are taught that protecting and leading equals controlling. And culturally, a lot of it is from upbringing and then watching their fathers dominate their mothers. And so in reality, control does breed fear and it does not breed love. True love and respect comes from choice and from freedom. Do you agree with that?
I agree. I agree that true love comes from choice, not freedom. Yes.
Okay. I have a second question for you. What does unhealthy control look like to you?
From a man's perspective, unhealthy control is limiting. Um, it's emotionless. It's unempathetic. It's a sense of regardless of how you feel, this is what we have to do. It's really overbearing. Um, I can just sitting here, I can think of countless of times when I've been the exact thing that I'm talking about. Just acting in a way that removes the emotion or how traumatic an experience can be from the situation, and just saying, hey, look, this is what it is and this is what we have to do in order to make it to this next point. It's brutal. It's a negative thing. It has a negative connotation for sure.
I'm sorry. I've had friends. I've never been in this type of relationship, thankfully. But I've had friends where they've been in situations where their boyfriend or husbands have monitored their phones. They have controlled the money. I often have talked about in other episodes where I was married for 17. I was married and in a relationship for almost 20 years. And in that relationship, I feel like I was financially abused. I had a stay-at-home husband for 17 years. It started out with him wanting to start his own business and me wanting to support him. And then when that business crumbled, he kind of fell into what I believe was a state of depression. And he kept saying things like, well, I'm not going to go back and work for the white man because it fell through. But he had no problem coming to me and asking me for money that I was getting from the white man for him. And so I feel like a lot of times when that happened, you wound up, not saying you particularly, but men in general, wind up silencing their partner's voice and then using anger to intimidate them. And sometimes that control can feel like security for a man, but then it creates resentment in that woman. Do you know of any situations, or can you expound on that for me?
Yeah, yeah. Mm. Me personally, I've been asked, to share locations. I've been, it's been brought to my attention. As far as why it's important. You know what? I'll speak to it from, that proprietorship perspective, like, wanting to be your own boss and trying to like buck the system. Uh, when you take that risk and you jump, they reference it as a cliff. When you jump off that cliff, you out there in no man's land. And what you start, it kind of become your identity. Like, for example, me as an athlete, I grew up playing football, and that was a part of me. In fact, it was majority of who I was. When I looked in the mirror, that's what gave me my confidence. That's what gave me my my baseline, my foundation. However, at some point, everybody has to stop playing football, and when the game was removed, when the game of football was removed from my life, I was, the skeleton of what was, and I had to, essentially rebuild. Not all athletes have the faculties or the tools to rebuild without harming others. Some of us, pick up the bottle. Some of us pick up the bottle and never put the bottle down. Um, a lot of us, majority of us, rely on our old game films or things that we used to do to try to validate what was, as if it still play a role now. And it's, as you know, it's insecurity. It's insecurity coupled with vulnerability and trying to find that new reality. And I think, at least my message to men is always, is to understand that this is a human experience, and the same things that we experience, women experience too. And if we can sit in that solitude and sit in that moment and truly embrace how it feels, then that essentially makes us a better leader. We all know what it feels like to fall out of love with ourselves. Some of us know exactly how to get back in love with ourselves. Man or woman, that person is best to lead in that situation. When your partner fall out of love with themselves, if you've experienced that then and you've thoroughly experienced it, with accountability, then you do, have the tools to help guide them back. The caveat is, we as men, just for some reason, like, you can call it religion, you can call it entrepreneurship, the fact that we took the leap that gives us the entitlement to be the leader. And that's not always the case. Like, for example, what I did on the football field, yes, it was effective, but that don't 100% translate to my household. Just because I was a star athlete on the football field don't mean I get to be the star athlete at home. And our experience is our greatest teacher. So that, I mean, when we do experience those things as men, that's the best opportunity for us to grow and develop. Um, But without understanding exactly what we're going through, then we kind of leave a lot on the table. We leave a majority of that opportunity on the table, and we don't get to grow and develop. So we essentially fail ourselves, and that trickles us down, and we end up ultimately failing our families. But yeah, my best experience is, being a athlete, performing at the highest level, having a notoriety, you know what I'm saying, building a name for myself, you know, creating a product, which was me. And then, at some point that product becomes invaluable and you got to start over again. That's a part of life.
I honestly believe that my ex-husband went through the same thing. He was the number two fullback in the nation. He graduated from Vanderbilt University, very good in football. And then he wound up doing something in college that messed up his football career. I'm not going to speak on what it was, but it was stupid. And when he did that, that messed everything up for him. He wound up not being able to play football for a while. And then that last year he did play. I believe he played against Peyton Manning in his last game. And then after that, graduated, got a business degree, did absolutely nothing with it. And I wound up meeting him at our last job that we worked at, getting into a relationship with him. And a year or so into that relationship, he wanted to move to Houston to start this business. And I think that when that business fell and it didn't take off like he expected it to, I feel like me supporting him really kind of enabled him. And I do believe that sometimes when you support a man, at least in my case, I can't speak for every man because he was the first man I'd ever been in a relationship with where I had ever done this with. Every other person that I had been in a relationship with, they were set. They took care of me. And so in that particular situation, with me having 4 children already, when I met him, because I didn't have any children with him and he didn't have any kids. And so I found myself moving to Houston. I did have my own place and he lived with a friend. We didn't move in together. We lived separately because I really don't live with a man that I'm not in a relationship with or married to, married being the operative word. And they wound up moving away and he wound up having to move in with me. And I think me just having to take care of him like that, the pressures of his mother calling him every day, asking him, why did you leave your job? You shouldn't have done that. That wasn't a smart thing to do. I chose not to be that person in his life because I saw that he was getting that from his mother. And in the end, he wound up resenting me for that. And ultimately, the relationship ended not because of those things, because of his mother. How do you feel society feeds men's obsession with power?
Society, you know, in America, we live in a capitalistic economy. It breeds competition. So at some point in some room that you walk in, or if you even want to aspire for more, you have to be the low man on the totem pole. So you walk into a room and you are powerless. You are powerless. And then when you come home, now you seeking some sort of validation. If you don't have the right, again, if you don't have that emotional regulation, then now you're trying to come home and you overexerting your power. Society does it to us in every facet. Again, because we live in a capitalistic society, the power of the dollar does a lot until you get to a certain point and you realize it's only so much money that's necessary. You know what I'm saying? And then it's about being present and being mindful and learning and enjoying the experience. Not to say that I do think that, being in a capitalistic society is more consequential than it is beneficial, but the benefits of it produces some good things if you can be disciplined. You know what I'm saying? If you can stay humble, the things that you learn on the path to attain a level of success or financial success can definitely make you a well-rounded leader. But I think it's through our economic system that our society pumps this power complex into us. So if we don't have the money, if we aren't the most wealthiest, if we can't afford the lifestyle that we feel we are entitled to, then what's the next best thing? And for most men, it's our, brute strength. So then we try to act in overbearing, dominant ways, and it's just not healthy. It's not healthy. And I don't think any of us possess the skills to change the type of economy that we live in. So then the best answer is to change our mindset and change our perspective.
I was going to say, based on something that you just said, I never faced in my relationship trying to be dominant or I'm the man, I'm the leader. I never faced any of those things. So a lot of times when we're sitting on these lives and I'm hearing these things, I don't relate to that. I can't come up on the panel and say, oh yeah, my husband was this, that, or third. He was none of those things. He just allowed me to just lead everything. And I think that within itself was telling now that I'm outside of that relationship.
Yeah.
So when you said that leadership thing, I don't think he ever had that. Like, I really don't think he ever had that because I don't think he was set up in life to have that, either from his mother or his father. Both of them were in his life. I will say that they were divorced when he was 8, but I don't think he ever had, I'm the leader in him. Like, he was never that way. He was more so, I'm going to say performing masculinity. I'm not going to say a masculine man, but if you understand when I say performing masculinity, he came off as the rah-rah, always overly aggressive male, but not a leader. Does that make sense?
I understand.
If you're not the provider, do you feel like a man is failing and that he's put under a bunch of pressure based on what you just said? Can he feel like powerless in that type of situation when you've never been set up to be masculine and be able to lead?
From a mediocre perspective, yes. My perspective is that you need don't be the man that society says you're supposed to be. Be the man that your family needs you to be. And in doing so, you are leading. And it definitely takes more than, money to lead a family. However, when we go out into the world, or at least from my experience in America, a lot of it has to do with the dollar. So,
Okay.
if you don't have the right mindset, then you are comparing yourself to other men. And my father always told me, like, hey, listen, it's always going to be somebody that has more than you. So if you attach your identity to something materialistic, what are you going to do when you run into the man that has more than you? Uh, what I remind myself of daily is, a lot of us, man, we always talk about the lion and the lion pride. Well, I remind myself, the lion falls to the worm. So in the Sahara, at some point, this big mighty lion, he got to go back to where he came from, and he decomposes, and who's right there? It's the little bitty worm. The one that's persistent and consistent. And I think that's the proper perspective to have, because that one keeps you more mindful and it keeps you more appreciative. It keeps you from being so materialistic, especially when we think about where majority of, or at least where a lot of us say we come from. A lot of us, proclaim to start from nothing and build some sort of magnificent empire. Well, let's maintain that humility with the hunger. And I think that balance is where true masculinity lies. Like, you shouldn't have to rely on our brute strength all the time. That shouldn't be our first go-to. You know what I'm saying? In most cases, in fact, I just told a woman, like, she was, and this might be more relevant later on, but I was talking about the idea of disciplined children. And I said, when we talk about being fathers, you always heard men say discipline, discipline, discipline. And I'm like, well, what about, at 2 a.m. when you're in the ER and you worried about your baby?
Mhm.
When you really worried about your baby, it's not always about discipline. It's not always about discipline. And it's definitely, you know what I'm saying? It's not masculine to be so strong. How can you be so strong in the ER when you know nothing about medicine? You don't understand what this baby is going through. All you got is, 225 pounds on the bench press. If you choose to make that your foundation, then in most cases, like anytime you outside of the gym, or if you make money, having a certain amount of money, your foundation, anytime you outside of something that you can't buy, what are you gonna do? So we gotta stay balanced. We gotta stay balanced. But I do want to acknowledge, it sounded like you was providing a conducive environment for your ex-husband's growth, and that's what we really need as men. We need that challenge. We got it, because if you're not growing, then you're dying. If you're not growing, then you're dying.
I definitely felt like I was. We were best friends. And I used to always say to myself and to him as well, I said, I don't feel comfortable not having you in the home to raise the child that we do have together when you've been in the home while I've been raising my other children. Because I'm gonna be honest, he wasn't helping me raise my children. My children were teenagers, like except for my youngest son. I think he was maybe 5 when we started talking. And so he didn't do a lot financially for them simply because he did not have the means. I was always the breadwinner, but it didn't bother me because he did other things. Like he cooked, he cleaned, he went to meetings that I couldn't go to because I was at work. So I never looked down on him for the things that he was not able to do. I knew full on well what I was dealing with early on into the relationship. But sometimes I feel like people think that money is the end all be all when it comes to support. I have been on my own since I was 16 years old. I have been on my own since I was 16 years old, paying bills in a full-fledged apartment with a child. I was 16 years old. And my father told me that I would not be able to live in the home because my mother did not want me to keep the baby. And so we were going back and forth a lot. And so he gave me 3 months worth of rent. He said, I'm going to pay your rent up for 3 months. I have 8 children. I'm not able to do this for everybody. I want you to take this and go on with it. And from that moment to this one, I've never had to return home. I've always been able to manage on my own. And so I did see that we grew up two different ways. And what I was doing as a mother to my children, even with him living in the home, I would have done if he wasn't in the home. So I never looked at it like I was taking care of him. What made me look at it that way was, and I've told this story often, we were standing outside in the rain getting ready to go pick up my car because it had broken down. And he turned and looked at me and said, "You should have told me to get a job." And once he said that to me, from that moment to the moment that we divorced, I did not take my foot off his neck. Every time he did something that was not favorable to the family, I was on it. Because what he let me know in that moment, he didn't need me to be his mother anymore. He didn't want me to be the person that was supporting him, which was crazy because he was complaining about his mother all the time. "I'm tired of her calling me. I'm tired of her doing this." But then you stood and told me that you wanted me to be just like her. And ultimately, what ended the relationship was that I became too much like her. And I was pointing out his flaws that I needed him to fix because now we have a son. And I don't want my son to see me doing this for you. I want him to see you leading the family. And with that being said, what do you think is the difference between influence, which is what I thought I was doing, influencing him to follow my lead, and then control?
I appreciate you for sharing your story with me. I can tell, I can feel your strength, you know what I'm saying, and how forthcoming you are with your vulnerability. I appreciate that. And we do have a lot in common as far as, how our households look.
Okay.
Influence and control, I think it really falls on, the person who's feeling it. Because it's like the same, I could correlate that question to constructive criticism and, talking down on somebody. Uh, Influence and control. Yeah. So to answer your question, I just, share a little bit more about me. My wife and I, we've been married for, it'll be 10 years. And actually it'll be 10 years in December. And up until year 9, it was just her and I, and things were as they were then. Uh, Mind you, I did have a child on her. We had separated at one point, and my daughter mama conceived, and I was forthcoming with my wife. But in that same moment, she decided that she wanted to expand our family, and at the same time, she wanted to continue to pursue her career goals. Um, so then, from my perspective, being in that situation, I could, if I chose to, I could see it as her trying to control me. Like, hey, listen, you being unfair. You want to, make a baby and you want to have your job. Like, you basically trying to control me. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, what about me? Or, and I'm glad that I had enough experience, or I was, comfortable enough with myself to see it a different way, to see it as influencing, um, and seeing it as an opportunity, as a challenge, letting her vision become my mission, and then letting my creativity take shape. And through that process, like I said, I was able to, I was able to take that jump and start my own business. And it hit, the salary that I walked away from, I ended up making more than that within my first contract. So it was a blessing. It was definitely a blessing, for her to want more for herself. Um, and in her doing so, she influenced me, to go into the darkness and see what's out there, and see what I could find. Yeah, but I think if I would have saw it as control, then I wouldn't have been in the spot that I was at to be where I am today. So the difference really lies within the person who feels that way is perception. Like, perception is a big thing in this human experience. How we see things, it shapes our reality. you know, and if you, even from listening to you speak about, you know, how you conceive your first child, I hear you seeing it as, you know, something to overcome. Like it's a challenge, it's a trial, it's a tribulation. And that tells me like we on the same page as far as how we perceive things. You know what I'm saying? But if a person want to perceive themselves as being controlled, then that's what they're gonna do. Or if a person want to perceive themselves or perceive somebody as being influential or, you know, a motivating factor, then that's what they'll do. So it's up to the person. Perception plays a huge role in what we go through because, you know, as you know, as soon as you overcome one challenge, the next one knocking at the front door, and that's what we call life. You know, that's what we call life. So again, you can say it's a beautiful life, or you can say it's a hard one. It's up to you.
Absolutely. I think that my parents are the ones that influenced me because I think that by them being ministers, both of them were ministers. My mom was an evangelist. My father is a bishop. He's deceased now. He died when I was 23. They influenced my decision because if you are saying that you're a minister, how can you be asking me to have an abortion? How can you be teaching me from the Bible one thing and then trying to coerce me to do something else? And so I think sometimes influence can inspire your cooperation through respect, which I had lost for them at that point, or it can control your fears into compliance. And I wasn't going to be controlled into compliance because I wasn't raised that way. Like they didn't raise me to just buckle under pressure. I've never buckled under pressure, even to this day. And I'm 51 years old today. And so for you to preach and teach me one thing and then ask me to do something else, I just was not going to do that. And I've always been a bucker of the system since I was little. Like my parents used to say, do this. And I was like, I'm not doing that. Even as a 10-year-old, I can remember a time that my dad was making some grits, and I can't stand grits. I don't eat grits. I don't eat oatmeal. I don't eat cream of wheat. I don't like anything. It's the texture. And so one day he was like, you're going to eat these grits. And I was like, I'm not going to eat that. And so he started stuffing the grits in my mouth, and I just threw them up in my bowl right at the breakfast table. And it made everybody so disgusted that he put me out of the kitchen. And what I will say is he never tried to force me to eat anything or do anything like that. We were the same sign. And so I think he kind of understood she's a lot like me. And so growing up, I did have a great relationship with my father, but I also had a horrible relationship with my mother because I am the victim of sexual abuse by my biological father from the age of 10 all the way until I was 15. And I was not the type of child that did not report it. The minute that it happened, I told my mother. She was actually in the hospital having my younger brother when it started. And the only reason why I can remember that I was 10 is because I'm 10 years older than him. And as soon as she came home from the hospital, I told her what happened. She addressed my father with it, and he put on a show. If I could have given him an Oscar today, he would have gotten an Oscar. That's how great the performance was. And so after that, I suffered the effects of his lies because they started sending me to my great-grandmother, which was actually a blessing in disguise because me being the woman that I am today, that came from her. She taught me how to cook. She taught me how to sew. Later on in life, when she got sick, I wound up taking care of her. And I'm going to segue that into this next question. How can a man begin shifting from his control to healthy leadership? Because I don't think my father had healthy leadership. He was very abusive. It's 8 of us. And then he had 2 outside children. We all suffered abuse any day of the week, at any time of the day, that he felt like being tyrannical. And I had a mother who just sat by and watched it. She literally would go in her room, close the bedroom door, and just listen to our father abuse us. She did nothing.
Yeah. You definitely don't wear, you know, what you've been through. You was a very strong woman.
Thank you.
something else. She's something else. And what's crazy is I can relate to that grit story because I like to put sugar on my spaghetti. And my mama was like, "You don't need to do that." So what she did though, she put on Freddy Krueger and just made me sit because you could see the TV from the table, and everybody else went on to do what they did, and I had to sit there with my plate of spaghetti, no sugar, and watch the scary movie. But so when we talk about leadership, there are like it's a study, and it's something that you can enhance. It's almost like a skill. You can develop it.
Mhm.
And I think that, and from what you were saying, like if I better understood the previous question as far as influence and control,
Mhm.
you know, and then I'm like, okay, I understand. It's about you asking like if somebody encouraging you to be what you want to be as opposed to somebody wanting you to be what they want for you. um, and that goes right into leadership because the most two common forms of leadership in our society is transactional leadership and transformational leadership. Of course, transactional leadership is more so dangling the carrot in front of the donkey. If you do this, then I will give you this. And that's that ties into control. You know what I'm saying? I'm doing these things for you, so I expect you to become a minister. I expect for you to become a part of the church. I expect for you to become an NFL player. You know what I'm saying? I'm doing all of these things, and in return, I want this back. This is an equal exchange for value, as opposed to transformation leadership is more about growth and development. And a big way to tell the difference is, how a person chooses to lead. The words you said, you know, tyrannical. That correlates. That's more about being transactional. Do this and you'll get that. End of discussion. While transformational leadership is more so, it's like leading by example. So, for example, something that we both have in common. My father transitioned in 2017. Uh, and sorry for your loss as well. But my I've experienced the loss of a parent, and it was very hard for me. uh, it hurt. It hurt very bad. It hurt real hard. And I had to understand how I felt, and I had to establish a new reality for myself. This is something that my wife will experience. It's the inevitable.
Okay.
So, and I'm not saying that I'm in control of no puppet master, but during my time of grievance, I spoke to her about how I felt, and we, talked about this new reality. We kind of help cultivate it. Although I'm healing myself, I'm being open with her, so I'm essentially leading by example. What I'm really saying is like because of that experience, because I was able to be intentional with myself, but because I was able to lead myself, I do think that I'll be, you know, ready to help her grow and develop during that phase of her life. Again, because it's something that we all experience as people. Um, but yeah, I think that's the biggest difference: transformational versus transactional, and helping lead other people.
So in that fear being the illusion for some people, because some people just really are afraid. I will say this. I am a person that has never been afraid of anything. Even to this day. I'm not afraid of anything. I am the type of person that I've lived in a lot of states. And the very first state that I moved to was Nashville, Tennessee. One day I just decided, you know what? I don't want to live here anymore. And in 2 weeks, I was living in Nashville. And then from Nashville, I moved to Houston. Stayed there for 4 years, stayed in Nashville for 4 years, moved from Nashville to Indiana. That's where my ex-husband was actually from. I stayed there for 8 years. And then one day I said, you know what? When I decided to divorce him, I said, I'm going to move very far away so that I can make sure that I'm solidified in this relationship being over. Because in my opinion, I had done everything that I could do in that relationship. And I wasn't going to give it anything else. I'd given it almost 20 years. But I do know that if I had stayed in Indiana, we probably would have wound up back together and it would have been, at this point, dysfunctional and trauma bonded because I had married this man 3 times and divorced him twice. So if I knew if I stayed there, we would probably end up back together because I'm a long-term dater. I want it to work. And it just was not working. And it was not going to work. And so I moved to Las Vegas, which is where I live now. And I've never had the fear of going to a new city, exploring it with no family there. I've never had those type of fears because I have been a loner my entire life. I've never had a whole bunch of friends. I've never surrounded myself around a lot of family. It's always just been me and my children. I'm extremely introverted. So for me to even be doing what I'm doing right now, it has to be for a reason. It has to be for a cause. How can fathers show that type of strength without dominating their children and not dominating their wives as a husband?
I think the best way, so I think it's about perspective and then communication. And communication plays a huge role in what we're talking about right now. And my plan, as I become more of a father, is I talk to my son and I say, "Hey, son, I'm afraid." One of my fears that I've more so overcoming, like if we had to go do it today, I wouldn't be as afraid as I was 3 years ago, is roller coasters, especially ones with them big drops. But I would tell my son, I'm afraid right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll tell him, like, but what I do know about fear is on the other side of that is something that's just like so empowering, something that, it kind of like revitalizes you and make you feel alive again when you're able to face your fears and walk through it. So, let's just play fortune telling. If my son came to me and said, Daddy, I want to try out for the football team, but I'm afraid. I tell him, son, it's okay to be afraid. I'm afraid of roller coasters. Do you want to go to a theme park? And then we could start the conversation from there. And hopefully he say, yeah, let's go. And then I take him on a journey with me to face my fears. And I talk to him about how it feels afterwards. So I don't know what part of being a man they said, like, silence equates to strength. But the hardest thing for most men to do is to talk about how we feel or how things make us feel. And yet we want to be so strong. Like, uh, I get a lot of flack from men to say, I just say what the women want to hear. But this is what I truly believe. This is what works for me. And that's why I can say it in multiple different ways and still get back to the same principles. Because it's what it's what I live. Like, I believe in this wholeheartedly. And I think it's about, again, facing those fears. So when we talk about, having a healthy relationship with the mother of our children, or even having a healthy relationship with the women in our lives, our biggest fear is her leaving. So to face that fear would be to give her the choice. And again, like, we back full circle, because I think that was the second question that we talked about. The idea of choice versus freedom. And should a woman choose you, or just giving her the space to feel how she wants to feel and make the choice for herself? We exercise vulnerability, which is a sign of strength. But at the same time, if she chooses to be with you, that's something special that you got going on. you know, giving a woman, allowing a woman to make her choice for herself uninfluenced, it's power in that. It's power in that through vulnerability. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's how we grow in strength as men. That's being vulnerable is equivalent to bench pressing 225 pounds, 25 times. Um, and that is where we grow. That is where we grow. I don't know why we're so afraid to do the intuitive work.
Strength is not about fear. I think that it's about consistency. It is about respect. It is about being able to guide your family. A father shows strength when he can discipline without breaking a child's spirit. I feel like our father broke our spirit a lot. And although he made up for that later on in life, like I said, before my father passed away, even through everything that he did to me, we were very close because he was able to be vulnerable and ask for forgiveness. I was able to even recognize that what he did showed that he was weak. It showed a sickness. When a man is able to admit his mistakes and then he can model that from underneath pressure, I think that the only way for him to lead great in strength is to lead without being intimidated by others. And that comes in not allowing how you see yourself through another man's validation. That's what I believe. I believe that the strongest form of strength is being able to be vulnerable, because a lot of men do not possess vulnerability. And I will tell you this. I hear a lot of men say things like, well, I can't be vulnerable with a woman because she gonna tell everything that I've told her. I will say this. In my relationship, I don't remember my ex-husband telling me anything about his past, but I will say that had he told me anything about his past, I wouldn't have used it against him, because I would have known that with all the other pressures that he's already gone through in the world as a man, not being able to follow his dreams into football, not being able to do all the things that he wanted to do, I would know that those words would have cut him deeply. And when I told you that I felt like he resented me, I think the resentment was more so because of my strength. Because he would always say things like, man, you could just do anything. You have so many great ideas and you're very resourceful and you just get up and you just do those things. But he never talked that way about himself. How does absence of a father and then having strength and being able to be vulnerable shape a child's future?
I think that really makes the child like one of them ones, like that's one of them rare ones that just, like they do astronomical things, they hit so many milestones so quickly. They should be studied, because I don't know. I don't know. I can see the pattern, not absent father would make a young man have to become what he needs to protect himself at an early age, which in most cases is this physical brute strength. But then for him to have the self-awareness and the consciousness to reflect and evaluate himself and to grow intuitively, to be well balanced, that's without without a tether, that's like walking into a dark room and all you have is you just walking along the walls and seeing what you can find. uh, you might bump into a square, and this is what you use to shape your, your understanding. Yeah, that's just a special one. That's a rarity. And I'm not. That's a novelty. That's an anomaly, and it's not uncommon. I think we see a lot of men, that become that way. And what's even more special about those type of men is that they don't leave a wake of people that they hurt in the past neither. Like, they have one of the cleanest jackets, the cleanest names that you can think of. It's definitely, I'm envious of them. You know what I'm saying? Some guys that you just have to clap for, and you just gotta acknowledge them. Like, it's a guy that I went to school with. He never hated on nobody. He didn't come from, all of that. All he had was, you know, the courage that his mama put in him. And he ain't hurt people. He always wore a smile, and he done been through a lot. And today he on one of the biggest stages in the world, and he's still the same person. I love him so much just to be able to be in his proximity. You know what I'm saying? And he helped me reflect and say, damn, like, I didn't have to do what I did to her. I should have did it a different way. You know what I'm saying? I wish I would have did it a different way, so my name could be as clean as he is. Uh, but that's special. I'm not one of those type of people. I've made some filthy mistakes. I've hurt people to get to where I'm at today. Although I am happy with where I'm at and who I am, and the man that I am, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that. But I can't tell you how, because that ain't me. My father talked to me. My father gave me a lot of game. My mother did too. But I still have to make my own mistakes. So that's a great question.
I think that whether it is a male child or a female child, absent often leaves those children with feelings of the rejection. I think that insecurity, longing for validation, and then some boys, they grow up, uncertain about their future, uncertain about their manhood, while girls, they oftentimes, they struggle with self-worth and in relationships. That's why you'll find women looking for that type of validation of their father and sometimes their mother through other people and sometimes other women. Because I think an imperfect presence is far more impactful than absence. Children need to see and hear and feel that their fathers are either in their lives and that, or they at least have access to them if they're not always in their lives. I will say that my father was removed from the home when I was, I want to think 15, but he was at the house every day. You wouldn't have known that he moved from the home. He came to the house because I didn't have a maternal mother. So my mother never cooked. She never cleaned. I couldn't tell you what my mother's food tastes like to this day, and I'm 51 years old. I don't know. I've never eaten any of the food that she's cooked that I can recall. My father cooked all of our food. He cleaned up the house because he was a stay-at-home dad. And I think one of the reasons, now that I just said this, because I just had an epiphany, one of the reasons that I felt like I was so comfortable doing that for my ex-husband is because my mom did it for my father. But the difference between my father and my ex-husband is my father had a side hustle and he worked himself up into being able to get to the type of money that we needed when we were younger as I became older. And so we had money later on in life, but when we were younger, we were struggling. It was 8 of us. We lived in a 4-bedroom apartment where my brothers shared a room, 4 of them. My mom and dad had their room. Then me and my sister's room was across the hall. And then my dad had what he called an altar room. And that's where most of the abuse took place. It was weird. Like, I can't even describe to you. But as I just thought about that, I think one of the reasons why I saw nothing wrong with me supporting my husband in the fashion in which I supported him is because although my mom went to work every day and she paid the bills, that's all that she did. She was actually the man in the relationship. She went to work, came home, went in her room, closed her door, and act like she didn't have 8 kids. And my father was the one that was cooking, cleaning, and making sure that everything was done. But he did it in such an abusive way that those are the memories that I have of him as a kid until I became older. And then I had my oldest daughter, which is 34 right now. And he was the most immaculate father from that point on. And I think a lot of times, even as parents, I'm guilty of it as well, because I had my first child when I was 16. As a mother, when we have grandkids, and I have 3, one of them lived with me. My oldest daughter lives with me. We do try to correct those mistakes in our grandchildren or in our younger children that we made with our older children. Because as a 16-year-old, whose mother was I? Like, how did I know how to be someone's mom when I didn't have that type of upbringing? I didn't have nurturing and any of that, but I was very nurturing to my children because I lacked that. But I did get it from my great grandmother. So I was able to pour into my daughters what my great grandmother was able to pour into me, because my mother did not have a great relationship with her mom. She was an only child. Then my grandmother, her mother was an only child, but then my great grandmother came from 21 siblings. So she taught me everything that I know. So I think it's important that even if you don't have a father and a mother, because it's just not about fathers, if you don't have a father and a mother, there needs to at least be someone that's able to step into that role and assist that child into becoming the person in society that they're supposed to be. What role do you think that forgiveness plays in fatherhood?
I think it kind of clears the mirror up, forgiving how we were raised or forgiving our fathers for what we experienced allows for us to be more accountable for our reality. So then it does give us more control over our reality, and that's what we create for ourselves. Um, as a father, like, I don't know where this thought came from, but I know that my children will break my heart. I know they're gonna hurt me, and I'm prepared to forgive them. And I think that that's a real form of leadership. Forgiveness without resentment. That is so important. Because that's what allows a person to be themselves and become what they will become. And just admiring the person's growth and development, especially our children. Just we're gonna bump our head, we're gonna make mistakes along the way. But at the same time, I'm so happy to see what you become. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to be what I want you to be. I'm just happy to be a part of your experience. But yeah, forgiveness allows for us to take more accountability for our actions. Yeah, I forgive my father for a lot.
My mother. So I speak from it from a imperfect parent at 16, doing it the hard way all the way up to now. And I would say that forgiveness allows us to break certain cycles. It allows parents to see what they lacked and allows them to forgive themselves for the mistakes that they made. It also allows them to make space for, I believe, a healthier parenting cycle. And I think that when we don't forgive ourselves and we don't forgive our parents, bitterness is passed down to our children. Fathers teach their children resilience. They teach them humility and they teach them the power of starting over and fresh because nobody gets it right. I can sit here and say, as a mother of 5, I didn't get it right.
Right.
I'm pretty sure if I brought my daughter in here, she could tell you some stories because I think humility is important. I think that I've always been the type of parent that have allowed my children to speak their voice to me as long as they've done it respectfully, and that has worked for me in my relationships with my children. Would you say, and I don't know how old your children are, I'm talking about I got grown kids, but I don't know how old all of your children are, but do you see yourself, if they're not at the age now where they are able to come to you and really be vulnerable and talk to you as preteens and adults, do you see yourself being able to allow them the power of starting fresh by being able to tell you exactly how they feel as long as they're able to do it in a way respectfully? And do you feel like you're able to listen and receive that information?
You asked me that question. So I have a daughter and a son. My daughter be 3. My daughter just turned 3. My son just turned 2.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like what we fumble a lot as fathers is, when our children become of age and they become sexually active. Like if we aren't prepared mentally to have that conversation, or because it is a lot more nuanced than just what I hear a lot of us men say is, "Oh, I'm gonna tell her, don't have unprotected sex until you marry, or sex until you marry." But that's it's silly. It's like you don't understand anatomy. That does not work. Since the beginning of time, fathers have been saying that, and it does not work. And and I'm gonna tie it back to the question, but so we need to take a different approach. But when it comes to, that we find out that our daughters specifically are sexually active, and this is why I say it's more nuanced, because just mentally prepare myself for that conversation. I'm thinking like, what will hurt me the most? What would, make me react irrationally? And it will be the idea of the things that I've done with women happening to my daughter. You know what I'm saying? Or some man doing these things with my daughter. And it's like, well, from that perspective, I have to be real with myself. And the first thing I need to do is make sure she understands that she can talk to me about it. Not talk to me about you know, each and every specific act or the choices that she make, but understand, create an environment to where if she feel like something shouldn't have happened the way that it happened, and she should be able to talk to me about it.
Mm-hmm.
And making sure, that we all sit down, as far as myself and her mother goes, and to have this conversation like, hey, listen, this is, this is SMEX education. Let's talk about what you understand about your body. Your menstrual is not just 7 days, it's a cycle of things, and it's different feelings that flow. And let's figure out what you want to do to help prevent, what we think is the worst case scenario. You know what I mean? Instead of just saying, so right now, as of today, how I felt, because the question was like, am I going to be able to have this open door policy with my children? And me sitting here today, my answer is yes. When I found out that my daughter has become sexually active, my initial what I tell myself today is that, hey, we're going to talk about birth control. We're going to figure out which birth control is the best fit for your body. Now, when it actually come time for that, I gotta be real. I don't know how it's gonna go, but yeah, like even with my baby boy, it drives some of my cousins crazy how I let him decide what he want to do. And if he want to sit right here and just observe, he can do that. And he know when it's time, when he ready to explore, he can come grab me and we can explore. You don't have to do anything that you don't want to do. And that's completely different from how we were raised. You know what I'm saying? We was raised, you do what I tell you to do, and you do it when I tell you to do it. And that's not the case for my son. And not to say that I was raised wrong, but I just want to see, a different outcome. I want him to value his opinion so much so that he don't just go running and telling everybody how he feel and what he think. If you value your opinion, you'll keep it to yourself. But yeah, I I'll say it like this: I'm bench pressing, my ability to have an open door policy with my children. I'm strengthening myself to be able to have that conversation because I do recognize patterns. Uh, and I think what we can, signs are for the conscious mind. So you recognize a pattern and you should prepare yourself for it. But yeah, I think that at least I hope to be strong enough to be able to have that open door policy. Now, mind you, it's not some things that I don't want to hear about. I don't want to hear, you know, don't bring it close to me. In fact, I'm willing to delete all my social media. You know what I'm saying? Uh, but again, we talk about fear, and that's something. And the next chance I get, I definitely plan to have this conversation. I'm gonna tell them, man, like, hey, listen, the reason that you copping out by just saying, oh, I'm gonna tell my daughter don't have sex until she, marry, and if she get pregnant, then that's on her. I'm gonna say the reason that you saying that is because you know what you've done. And the moment that you find out your daughter has become this way, not only are you imagining those things being done to her, you actually imagine a phallus bigger than yours. You know what I'm saying? And this is what's making you react irrationally. You feel out of control. You feel like you don't have no power. You know what I'm saying? So now you trying to be so cold and hard on her for doing something that's natural to the human body, especially if you understand a menstrual cycle. That's an ovulation phase. That changes things completely from at least when I understand how women feel, and what they want to do and how they feel like and what they want to, do with their body. So we can't, I think it's irresponsible, it's bad parenting to have that closed door policy in a one-off the situation because we're afraid or we feel powerless.
I would say this. I've never had that conversation with my daughters, and I have three daughters. My oldest is 34, and my youngest she'll be 29 in December. I have very beautiful daughters. I knew that men would be chasing them, but I've never had the conversation of sex with my daughters. I will be honest with you because I don't feel like that is my place. I feel like it is my place to prepare them. Hey, let me know when you get your cycle. Let's talk about what that cycle means. But I've never said save sex until you get married because I didn't save sex until I got married. And I'm not talking about the first time that I had sex. I'm talking about when I actually had it, where it was consensual. I wasn't married. And so, what do I look like telling my children to do something that I did not do? I'm very forthcoming with my children. I do talk to my children. I do allow, like I said, my children to talk to me about things and be as respectful as possible. But I didn't really want to know. It wasn't my business. What I did do is that, as I stated, is tell them, hey, when you get your menstrual cycle, this is what can happen. You need to be able to protect yourself when you go out into the world. I sat down with them and I had a whole biology class about STDs. That's what we talked about. I did talk about teenage pregnancy, but I never told them to wait until they were married. I told them to wait until you felt responsible enough to handle the outcome of your actions, whatever those outcomes are. Until this day, me being 51, and my oldest being 34, the next one being 33, and the youngest one being 29, we do not discuss sex at all. I have never asked them anything about their sex life. I have never involved myself in their relationships because that's not my place. It is my place as a parent to support them and to guide them. And I feel like I did that. And my oldest two, they do have children. They were adults when they had the children. So clearly they listened to me. And then my 29-year-old, she doesn't have children. She doesn't want children. She doesn't want to be married. And I'm not mad about that in the climate that we're in today. I'm just not. Do you feel that fatherhood impacts sons differently than it did daughters? Before you answer that, I'm gonna give you my take on this first. Sons, in my opinion, often model and identify with their father. And when they watch how their fathers handle stress, love, and responsibility, you often find that they will either repeat or reject those patterns. I have 5 brothers. And what I can tell you about my 5 brothers is 4 of them at least have children, and all of them take care of their kids. But I would say that they did reflect my father and how my father took care of us. We didn't go hungry. We weren't homeless. We didn't go a day without food. And so they did model his behavior. So I will say that in those situations, they're either going to repeat or reject the patterns. Now, the daughters, on the other hand, we often measure our value by how our father treated us. And I will say that although my father was abusive, and I know this sounds crazy when I tell this story because he can't be the protector and the predator at the same time, but he actually was. He protected us from our mother, who was very neglectful. She didn't feed us. She didn't clothe us. She didn't take care of us. He did all of that. And then he also was the predator. So my situation is very unique. But I will say, as a father, he did make sure that he instilled in my brothers to make sure that you were upstanding men and that you took care of your children because I took care of you. So it can go either way. So how do you feel, based on what I said, that fatherhood differs between sons and daughters?
So with me being a man and having a father and then having to raise a son, from that perspective, I plan to raise him to be in tune, earlier than I was, to have that self-awareness and have an idea of understanding that reflection, weighing benefits and consequences, understanding how life is a flow. I know that for a fact, but how I plan to raise my daughter, I'm gonna have to lean on how I am with my baby sister. And, with her, I always make it a point to give her the best that's out there so she, so she can be accustomed to it, That way, a man showing up with, taking her to Cheesecake Factory or even buying her an ankle bracelet is not enough to, blur her vision. So I definitely I plan to provide way more for my daughter than I do for my son. Just on the simple fact that I think it correlates to her preparedness. Not saying that I love my daughter more than I love my son, but I think, like I said, giving her that experience and understanding, what it feels like for a man to give you something. I want it to be so high that she don't just fall for anything, and that she, she has a higher standard for herself. So if we talk about relationships, and the same thing that I tell my baby sisters, you need to date 5 men. And dating don't mean sex, you know what I'm saying? But date 5 men and assign everybody a role. you know, and don't date nobody that go to the same school as you. While as my son, I'm gonna tell him, hey, listen, you need to focus on yourself and on your growth and development. Everything else comes in as it should. Why that is, it'll have to be from my own experience. Like I said, I've hurt women. You know, I can't say that I'm a good guy by no means. I say I'm decent at best, you know what I'm saying? But just having my experience, you know, I think the best thing that, or at least the women who I couldn't influence or the women that I couldn't have any sort of impression on, you know, they had a higher standard for themselves. You know, they were inaccessible to me. And I would want that for my daughter. So, yeah, it is different. Why it's different? I'm going to say it's different based off, you know, my experience.
I will say this. My mother and father did not raise my brothers and sisters. They didn't raise us different from each other. If I had to be in the house when the street light came on, my brothers had to be in the house when the street light came on. If I had to clean up, they had to clean up. If I couldn't date, they couldn't date. If I had to go to church, they had to go to church. So in that, if you saw us and you spoke with all of us, the story would be the same. We were all raised the exact same way. Nobody was raised feeling like somebody was superior to the other. And I think that is a great thing because I, in turn, have raised my children the same way because I have the same respect. I don't have a different level of respect for my sons that I have for my daughters. Although my daughters say that I'm a little bit lenient on my sons, which at sometimes can be true. You have to understand, I was 16 years old when I became a mother. I'm older now, so I have the knowledge, I have the education, I have the tools to be able to walk all of my children through the process of growth of becoming an adult. And so I am a little different in that regard. But what I do for one, I do for all of them. And the way that I've raised them, as far as if he can't do this, then you can't do it. I do not make a difference in them because they are boy and girl. And I don't do that simply because of what's going on in the world today. You have men feeling like I'm more important than you are. And a lot of that is based on how they were raised. It has nothing to do with society, to be honest with you. A lot of your legacy starts as small things and inconsistent actions in the home. So how you raise your sons and your daughter, it does affect how men build their legacy today. And we're going to go into the next question just based on what I said. Men begin building legacy today in their children to ensure that whatever you taught your son about legacy, you've also taught your daughter the exact same thing. How do you think you can do that?
I think the first step towards building a legacy starts with the community. You know what I'm saying? So we have to be involved in our communities. And in doing so, you know, we establish a name, you know, and that name is what can protect our children, both sons and daughters, you know. So it's almost, for a son, it's something to live up to or to surpass. And for a daughter, you know, it forms as a sense of protection. Like, hey, listen, that's Gemini daughter. Hey, don't play with her like that. You know what I'm saying? And just being in the community, having a clear, communicated set of standards and morals. You know, your morals and your standards that you have for yourself. I don't think it's something that we should keep close to our chest. I think that's something that we need to communicate, especially to the people that surround us, so they understand. You know, they don't. You know, you can simply tell a person, "Hey, listen, I don't play like that." You know, if you want to play with me like that, this is the reaction that you get, and then letting that be the standard that you know that becomes your legacy, and then as long as you maintain that standard, and that is attached to your name, and that's your lineage, and then your children grow up and you say, "Hey, listen, his dad didn't play like that. Don't play with him like that. Her dad is very serious. Don't play with her like that." Uh, you know, and I think that that's how we can, you know, start to build it and as well as, you know, pass it on, you know. So some guys are just don't qualify, you know, to be in proximity with your daughter based off of the type of man that you are. And it's an important piece because at the same time, you know, you giving back to the community. So the community, you know, gives back to you.
Absolutely. I think also, I think that when it comes to legacy, we need to make sure that we're keeping promises that say to our kids, that we're teaching them what values are, that any time that we spend with them is intentional, showing them respect. Just because they're kids does not mean that they don't get respect. Showing respect to their mother, showing respect to their father,
Yeah.
modeling honesty. Honesty is going to take your legacy farther than anything. Choose how you're going to build those bricks that you're laying for your children that they will have to carry forward, because it's not built on lies. And foundational legacy, because that's where it starts, in the foundation that you're building. If it's built right, I think you will raise phenomenal children. The last question that I have for you is, what do fathers need to remember about their influence?
We gotta remember that, that fake stuff, it don't last. You know what I'm saying? Our influence has to be real and
Mm-hmm.
it has to be applicable. Like it can't be some like like we talked about it earlier, a few minutes ago. You can't be telling your children to do something, not to do something that you did. Because what's
Absolutely.
going in that situation and they turn out to do it like everybody else is done and they get away with it. Now they undermining your influence. At least they perceive it that way. And I can see that snowball. I ain't saying that that's how it goes, but I can see that snowballing into effect. Like he can't tell me nothing. Like I'm smarter than him. You know what I'm saying? Uh, and honesty is the perfect word because it's not about, honesty is a great word because it's not about being perfect. But it's about being real, and being real is a choice. And authentic influence, you don't want nothing in return from your kids. Your influence is not to make your children a soldier in your army. Your influence is for you to be a soldier for your children. You know what I'm saying? And that's something that I took away from like just observing from a cultural perspective. I'm not, my mother raised us, she raised us to be tight knit. And if she needs something, I need to be on the way until I became a man and created my own family. I'm like, wait a minute, mama, the family that I created is more important than the family that I come from. So I'm not a soldier. I'm a soldier for my children. I got to put my children first. Um,
Absolutely.
so, I think I say that's what's most important about influence.
They're looking at you and they're trying to see how are you integral in their lives. I do have an affirmation, and I'll give that affirmation after I see if you have any closing arguments.
I don't have any closing arguments. I reaffirm what you just said because that's what it takes to be an effective youth development professional. These kids are watching you. They trying to make sure your actions match your words.
My affirmation for today is that I do not need control to be powerful. My strength is measured by how I respect others and not how I dominate them. Real power is shared, not forced. I have closing remarks. They are: power and control are not the same thing. One builds and the other one breaks them down. As men, it's time to ask, do I want to be obedient or do I want respect? Because you can't have them both. The moment we release control, we gain influence, trust, and real connection. Every episode, I always give books that are related to the subject, and here are the books: The Will to Change Men, Masculinity, and Love by Bell Hooks, No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert A. Glover, and The Mask of Masculinity by Lewis Howes. I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. Again, I am the Redhead Gemini, signing off.